We're live. Guys, hello and welcome to the first Samosa Talk of the year 2021. I think we've started the year on a very, very positive note when whether it comes to business or even in terms of positive signals of fighting the COVID pandemic. On the panel today, we have Karthik Nagarajan. He's the Chief Content Officer at Wavemaker. We have Sajni Masturlal. She's the Head of Content at Wakefit. We have Mayank Shah. He's the Category Head for Parle products. And we have Raj Deepak Das. He's the Chief Creative Officer and the Managing Director at Burnett India. Welcome to Samosa Talk, guys. Thanks a lot for making time for something like this. So, like we've mentioned, the topic for discussion today is around content marketing trends, and I was thinking that since we have we have a good parallel between the kind of agency representatives we have and the brand custodians, I thought we would play around how you guys look at content marketing and probably from your collective experiences define what content marketing is today. So, Karthik, if you could give a perspective, I think Karthik just kind of. Raj, if you could share your perspective on how you look at content marketing as an advertising professional who's been in the space for like years now. And what was your first impression about content marketing when the term started surfacing?
So I'll tell you, Hitesh, thank you for asking that. So let me tell you a very funny story before we start. So I'm telling you, I think 12 years back, 12 years back. So me and this gentleman called Arunav Kumar, now the
From
TVF guy,
TV.
but before that was TVF. So he was working with the creative and everything. We used to experiment a lot of stuff and we used to create those things and we used to go to one of the biggest brand in India. I can't name the brand because we are not supposed to name brands, right? My previous avatar, we used to go to the brand, and every day we used to come with full josh कि हम आज के बेच कर ही आएंगे, and we don't want to do anything but basic. And we used to go to that agent, client, and we used to present them ideas. आज ये है sir, what do you think about it? And I remember वो चाय पिला के भेज देते थे वापस. This is हाँ अच्छा है बाद में आना. And हम हर 2 दिन में पहुंच जाते थे. Right, and that is what the Hitesh was like. You know what? You go to marketing companies early days. I'm telling you, to slowly when he moved out and he started his own company, so brand started having his own content, and brand getting content came out much later. I think so last 3-4 years back, brands getting into content. It was the content creators started creating a content platform first. I think somewhere the miss happened between the advertising agencies or the media agencies missed that gap of owning content houses, and suddenly to jump out after the last 3-4 years back when it started popping up. I think there is a massive change happened, and there was a time early days when internet came, every client wanted a banner ad, then came a video, then came out as something, and now this entire thing is content marketing. Of course, it's part of our life now. You can't miss it. You don't get up in the morning and see an ad, right? सुबह हम कोलगेट का ad या दंतमंजन का ad या कौन सा फेयर एंड लवली या कोई भी ब्रांड का हम ad, sorry, not ग्लो एंड लवली, sorry, कोई ad नहीं देखते, right? We got into having as a human life. हर दिन हम कुछ काम करते रहते हैं. If the brand comes in the center, it's brilliant for us, and I think content marketing has the power to do that. It makes me a part of our life, not telling me what to do, but tell how it's part of your life. I think that's the power of content marketing has created in all the brand or marketing guy or creator's life. Yeah, it is.
And how do you differentiate content marketing from advertising, the conventional advertising that we talk about? Raj, can you hear me?
Can't hear you.
Karthik, probably you could share your perspective on content marketing, given that Wavemaker is a network that looks at the intersection of content, technology, media at large. But then what I've seen is some of the great work that is happening in the space in terms of content is either facilitated by Wavemaker or it's coming from Wavemaker directly.
Right. No, I think when we set out to define, what are the pillars of this organization itself, it was very clearly on media, content, and technology. And very few agencies in this space actually are such predisposed towards content itself. Right? So that was always there. But I was just, as Raj was talking, I was thinking of a time when I think it was when Sachin hit his 100th 100, and one of the brands wanted to do some sort of a thing around that. And I remember at that time, we created a great piece of content, and then it had to go all over Twitter and Facebook at that point. And we decided to use this animal called influencers. Right? At that point, influencers was not an industry, and everything. And I've been on Twitter for almost 4 or 5 years by then. So I had all the influencers in India, almost most of them, their phone numbers in my phone. So it was about 50, 60 people at best. Right? So I would just call them and say, hey, listen, you want to do this sort of thing, right? Now from there to sort of where we are today, right, where things are so commoditized, and today being an influencer it's a legit profession right now. It's been a fascinating journey, very, very, very exciting space.
Right. And Sajni, how do you look at content marketing, and what was your first impression about the whole idea when probably one of your agency partners came and pitched content marketing as a concept to you?
I was actually part of an agency, so my journey started as maybe a content writer in a digital agency. So I came onto the scene when digital was just starting, and at that time, I think the biggest thing we used to worry about was which post is going to go on which brand on that day, and that was literally the kind of planning we had at that point. Whereas from there, we moved on to how to plan bigger campaigns, how to distribute them digitally. And then I think when I moved to the brand side, I understood the difference and of doing it from the agency side and then doing it from the brand side. Whereas when you're on the agency, you kind of just tend to think about the creative execution or the creative rendition of an idea or a concept. But when you come to the brand side, then you think about how it affects your consumers, how it affects your business. You get to see the other side of what the campaign is actually doing for you. So for me, that was a very interesting shift, and it was also a reason that I thought that maybe after an agency, this kind of a role would be um more holistic in my experience, so to say.
Got it. Fair. Mayank, from your vantage point, I think Parle as a legacy brand has been there for years now, and I think you must have done some work or some campaigns which would be content marketing back in the day, but probably the definition or the name would not be the same. So how have you seen content marketing evolve over the years, and for you as a brand, how important it is to be that active in this space?
Okay. So to begin with, what Raj said, I think, very similar experience from where it started about, 10, 15 years back. And it all started with, content creators coming to you and saying, sir, आपका brand use करेंगे इसके अंदर. It literally started with that. And I mean, there were even companies who said, okay, we'll place your brand on the breakfast table next to the tea, there's that. It started from there, and today I think it has evolved to where brand becomes integral part of the content. As in, the content is created for the brand. So somewhere that's the kind of leap that we have seen. And there have been certain campaigns where we have done wonderful content marketing. Some of the campaigns which propagated philosophies of our brand. So we have beautifully weaved in content marketing as our part of marketing mix. So what I was saying was that from where we started to probably where it went, where you had content creators coming to you and pitching ideas, saying that okay, this idea would go well with your brand, to probably why don't you do something like that, to today where we have evolved to a level where we seek content which is interesting too. So I completely agree with what Karthik said, that today I think if you look at consumers, they are not really interested into looking at ads. Okay, that's the last thing I would like to do. 90% of ads are not even noticed by consumers. There are only two things which will probably attract attention to your ad, unless it's probably exceptionally well done, very quirky or something like that, or if that service or product is genuinely needed at that point in time by me and I'm looking for a solution. Otherwise, more than 90% of the ads are discarded. I mean, people don't even notice it. In a situation like that, the best thing then to do is, what are they interested in? What is the content that they are interested in? And how can I weave in my brand into it? That becomes, the best part. So today, what we normally do when we talk about content marketing is, we see good content. We see content that's interesting, that people would like to, consume. And then we see how can we weave in our brand into it. Thankfully, we are in a category which gives us that kind of flexibility to bring in that brand, weave in beautifully, bring out, its salient points beautifully into content, and weave it into content. So that's what we do. So probably, I can see and I can completely empathize with what, Raj said, that from days when it was like you have made a content and abhi you have to commercially make it viable or monetize it. So sir, आपका brand यहाँ place कर देंगे, यहाँ place कर देंगे. To today, where it's completely a different approach to probably even creating content or curating content.
Got it. So Karthik, you said something really interesting about how one of the campaigns that you did in the early days, there were people you reached out to on Twitter and they amplified the campaign. And like I think at this point also a lot of brands look at content marketing in probably two different compartments. One being say content creation, the other being distribution. And even now when they sit out and plan say a content marketing playbook, they don't look at all possible avenues. So what are some of the avenues you think that brands are missing out at this point in time, and that could like, and those avenues are right there in front of them, but because it's not something which is proven or it's not become mainstream, so brands are not really looking at that. So yeah, if you could share some thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are many. In fact, I was just, as Mayank was talking, I was just thinking, one of my earliest uh, uh, things that I really enjoyed growing up was this comic that you will see in the back cover of Amar Chitrakatha, which used to be a comic strip with a cowboy for gold spot, right? That to me was peak content marketing, right? Um, See, to me, it's not so much about avenues that brands are missing. See, if I have to explain content marketing to a client, I would probably say that it is a cultural intervention, right? You need to understand cultures and subcultures before you can actually intervene in a legit manner, in a manner that will create an impact. Right? So we've already seen brands who sort of started off by riding a wave into a situation now where they're taking long-term positions in culture. Right? To take a Red Bull and gaming, that Red Bull is owning a position in culture. Right? You take a client that we work with, which is Tata Tea and Jagore. So activism is something that they're owning. Right? So it's not just something they'll do, on a Sunday and then move on to something else next week. Right? I think that is a big change. Areas where brands can probably do more. I think we need to believe more as a community. Oftentimes, and organizations like us, which throw Excel sheets at you as media plans, we're all part of the problem. But if you can believe more in terms of culture and people who are driving this culture. For example, you take something like podcasts, right? It's been around for a long time. It's a lot of critical mass, a lot of great conversations that are happening, a lot of innovations happening around that space. But you still don't see brands all over it yet, right? So those are areas where I feel sometimes we need to take a leap of faith.
Fair. And Raj, how do you look at these changing content consumption trends? I mean, probably even in 2020, the amount of content people must have consumed in terms of, say, podcast or web shows has increased drastically. So you've seen that thing translate into brand briefs, which come to you also saying that this is one space we should be in, and this is one space we should really explore when it comes to creating content for our brand.
So I'll tell you, Hitesh, one of the things that, like I told you, 12 years back, 13 years back, when I'm telling you, when I'm starting to experiment on content, that means I've been experimenting till now. If there is no formula of the I'm going to client, and Mayank is a client. If I have a point of view, I go to Mayank. Mayank will have a different point of view, maybe. And you know what I mean? To getting the marketers on the having the same vision together, and to start the point of view for any content creation we do, we need to have to go through that journey. We have to go together. Doesn't matter whichever client it is, right? Like we say, you say it's legacy client, but sometimes even the most tech-savvy clients or the legacy clients, you have to go with the journey together. What is your vision for the brand? Do you want the vision brand to be a brand, or a brand to be literally a legendary brand? You know what I mean? You want people to swear by it. To do that, the journey has to be gone, and then we have to make a legendary brand. Let's see what is the part of culture that people are actually absorbing it. Am I part of a pop culture or not? Or am I part of a populism or not? Or I'm just in the brand that is interventing people's life. So I think, Hitesh, as a creator, I don't know, there are a lot of failures that you've gone through it. It's not like we have gone, like we have for an automobile brand. We did a reality show, I'm telling you. We got a 7-episode reality show. It turned into a disaster. We had to we have to stop. I'm telling you, 7 years back, we started and stopped it. But at the same brand also, when we went back and went asking, can we melt a ship, INS Vikrant, and make bikes out of it, that is Bajaj V. We did it, a success happened. Because then the content is not anymore like what Karthik says. Content is not anymore creating the video. Content is creating, living the person in that moment of the brand. It can be content. This comic strip was content for him. Riding the bike with Bajaj V is itself, it's not a branded content, it's a branded content. You created a content that people can live in. So it's not a box or a square that you're living in, actually. You know what I mean? Like it can be anywhere. I'm telling you. That's why I think that we always think of it. It's a square. We moved from a bigger square, from a 32-inch TV to 45-inch TV to now a 55-inch TV, to suddenly having a smartphone which is 10-inch smartphone to 11-inch smartphone to now having a smartwatch. The screen is changing. Forget about the screen. It has to go out of the screen also. And we have to start looking at the brands to how can we live that experience of content creation or experience of living the content out of the brand or out of the screen. And then we create the best contents possible.
Fair. So, like in your perspective, what is the best piece of content marketing you've seen so far? I think Karthik gave an example of how much it's
I think okay, let's hear Mike is there. Let me tell you, the packaging itself is the best content ever I've seen. People create memes till now. I'm sorry, the packaging was designed maybe 40 years back, before I was born, or before my uncle was born and everything. But till now, people use as a pop culture, as a pop art. Now that's the power of a branding and a content comes together. So why we have to look out and says we have to create a content. Sometimes the content is the pack. Absolute pack is the content. Coke pack is the content. Right? Sometimes your brand can be the content.
Right. So I think the manifestation which Parle did during lockdown, also removing the mascot from the pack for a few days, manifestation of that content in some sense. Mayank, like the reason why I was saying that you must have been doing content marketing over the years, like say one of the recent campaigns which Parle has been doing, I think in 2017, 2018, there was this theme that was going on around "You Are My Parle Ji," and for every occasion out there, there was a film that the brand produced, and all those films were planned in a way to address certain set of consumers or a certain appeal. So that is content marketing to me. But from your vantage point, did you think while planning those campaigns that this is a large content marketing play, that I'm crowdsourcing stories from people, I'm producing them again for the larger screen?
Yeah. So no, bang on. I think that's a great example. You're talking about Hitesh. So Yo My Parle Ji happened in two phases. The first phase was typical advertising. Okay, where we talked about Your My Parle Ji, there were 30 seconders. Okay, one of the best things about content marketing, which I love, is it liberates you from that 30-second ad. Okay, it takes away that from you, which is a great thing, honestly speaking. And now with media becoming so costly, from that 30 we have gone down to 15 and 20 seconds. And I don't know whether with those 5-second mandatory pack shots and all, you have just 5 or 10 seconds to tell your story. Now what will you say there and how will you engage consumers? Now from there, you get liberated with content marketing, and that's what we did. So if you look at You My Parle was done in two phases. First was typical advertising. It was like a broadcasting thing where I was talking to my consumers and said, did not make sense. And that's when we talked about, or when we thought about, content. We crowdsourced. We asked people to share their experiences, and generated content out of it. And you can see the beauty of those 5 films. The 5 films that we have done, they're legendary. People have loved it. Even today, I get that back saying that, this is the bad. This is the best ad we have ever seen of Parle, and it's been more than 3 years now. And every time, people come across it. So, and they're like, for me, if you ask me, the way people have resonated it, they've become immortal. Every time you have some patriotic thing happening, or a 26th January or a 15th August, you'll see the army guy a content piece going around. Or if it's a Mother's Day, the mother son duo film, or the Father's Day father daughter duo. But that's a beautiful piece of content, and that's what we did. So we said, okay, we want content. We don't want to plug in it's not that I don't want a brand to be there and then a content created around it to talk about my brand. I want great content, and then let's see how we can weave in brand, or what we want to say, what is my brand's communication, into that content. And that's what really worked for us. So these were beautiful stories, beautiful scripts that we crowdsourced, which were nothing but real life experiences of people. And then we crafted them beautifully into films. So that's how the content was created. It was purely content, with a view that we will weave in our brand properties into it, rather than the other way around, where we say, okay, these are the brand properties, now what is the content that I can create around it.
Speaking of brand and content in branded content, quick question to all the panelists. What percent, like in a branded content piece, what percent should be the brand and what percent should be the content? I mean, like it should be 80-20, 20-80. I remember one of the panelists, like one of the voices in branded content, Sandeep from Spring Marketing, I remember he'd mentioned that 80% of it should be content, the other 20% should be the brand. But like in your perspective, you think that there is a percentage that we can give to brand in a branded content, or content in a branded content? Even the people who are watching it live, you guys can share your thoughts in comments for something like this. Sajni, you could share like your formula for branded content, brand in content and branded content.
Absolutely, and we work with Sandeep and Spring Capital, so I think that that's fairly obvious. But even when we do films, like when we did the Open Letters campaign, the idea that we went behind was what is the thing that's keeping people sleepless, rather than actually talking about our product upfront, and trying to hit a chord where we're talking about touching on what people are feeling, and how we can kind of create content that makes people, that resonates with people, and kind of gets people together, and has a shareability quotient, rather than having just our product being placed in the content piece. And Sandeep was the writer also behind those films. But yeah, I would say that I think in terms of shareability, we saw that that really worked well with us, where people knew that it was a piece from Wakefit. People understood that this is something that is keeping people sleepless, and that's what we stand for as a brand. That we don't want, that we want to give you the best sleeping experience possible. And that really, I think, stuck onto people, and people didn't think of it as an ad. People thought of it as a piece of content that's organic.
Fair. So I think like Raj, Karthik, Mayank, if you guys have not checked out, I think there were a couple of videos which Wakefit did in the early days of lockdown, with Sumit Vyas as a person, like as a character, and then there was one with Rasika Dubed as a character. That film is, I think, all of us working during lockdown, and I mean, like you won't really mind the brand, like the brand that actually is not there in the front. You won't really mind the brand placement there, but by and large, that is great content to consume for everyone who was working from home during lockdown. So Raj, you could share your formula for branded content. What percent brand, what percent content?
I think there is when we started, one of the biggest thing is when you started doing branded content, a lot of people says make a TVC 30-second hai, usko bada kar denge to branded content ho jayega, and with that also product window also increases. That might will because all of us done that. अभी पहले 5 सेकंड होता था, अभी 15 सेकंड दे सकते हो ना, because अभी तो हमने 2 मिनट दे दिया तुम्हें, right? So I think that's what happened. But most importantly, when the branded content happened, it's the balance can go both way. Sometimes the product can be in the center and your content can be like I say, the best branded content, if you ask me what I've seen, is actually the movie Castaway. I have paid money to watch a movie that is on FedEx. Think of it. It is on FedEx. वो हर जगह FedEx था, but I never minded it. But I just loved it. I paid money and I watch it again because it's just classically brilliantly done movie. But there's a FedEx everywhere. And I think that's the biggest example of the branded content was. I think it started long back, but when we started forcing the brand too much, then the absorptions, the people start to absorb it. People start to reject it. I think the balance has to be such a way people don't have to get irritated because a brand is there, like constantly showing this key brand either hai. You know what I mean? You can't do that. I think that is when the irritation starts happening. I'm having a 10 seconds of my time, so let me have a 10 second of my time just scrolling my Instagram and looking at someone's video. I have 2 minutes. I have my 2 minutes to my time, so let me watch the video. Watch what I want to watch. In between, if you can absorb it so nicely, or create content which is so crazy that we want to love to share with each other. Have you seen that? It's like that. Have you seen that? Or I'm loving it. Are you loving it? That FOMO hota hai na ki mujhe kuch naya mil gaya, main tere ko dikhaunga tere ko. Either create something that bizarre or something so amazing that you want to share with someone else. Otherwise, if you want to make branded content as advertising, there is a place. There's 30-second ad for there, and I think it's right. It's 20-second and 15-second is getting. There's a place for that. If you're having a content, you are getting into people's life. You are asking them to give not money there. You're asking them to give 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of their life. Let them get something out of it. I think that has to be thought through very carefully.
Fair,
Can I
fair.
just jump in? I think it doesn't need to be an and or situation. I think that as brands, we need to create brand films as well, which talk about features and which talk about USPs. But we also need to be able to create content that kind of speaks on an entertainment side or has a lifestyle aspect around your brand integrated into it fairly seamlessly. So I think the whole point of content marketing today is that you have a good share of both the branded content as well, the ad spots as well, and you also have a good enough content bank that kind of also talks about the lifestyle that your consumers actually living through.
Karthik, do you think Indian brands today are really prepared or are open to don like an entire content marketing hat, so to say? When I say this, because like we are talking about branded content, we're talking about films, or we're talking about shows with certain creators and brand placements in that. But in the entire spectrum, these are just few pegs which brands have explored, and they don't look at it from a 360 perspective that okay, probably when I'm doing a film also there can be uh, creators to it, there can be communities I could engage with to take this message forward, there can be independent content creators who could just take inspiration from that film and create something on their own. At this point I think a lot of it happens in parts. I mean, probably a brand would look at one of these aspects and do it rather than looking at the entire calendar. And that is where the whole idea of brands as publishers comes into the play, that if brands start looking at this entire spectrum, that is when content marketing has truly arrived for that particular brand. So what's your perspective on how brands are looking at content marketing at this point? I'm asking you this question specifically. Like I said, I mean, I've spoken to a lot of content creators, I've spoken to a lot of communities. Most of the business that they've been doing with brands is more or less routed through Wavemaker or a network like yours.
Sorry, I was on mute. No, I think the first part of your question was on our Indian brands like fully invested in this direction, right? Full on. is the answer, right? Like if you take not now, you take a few years back. Raj gave a beautiful example of Castaway and FedEx, but you take a show like Tripling, which we almost co-created for Tata Tiago at that point. And whoever has seen the show, you would know that the car was technically the fourth lead character in the film. Right? That was that was a large part of that plot was very 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 customized for that brand. Right? To me, it still is one of the best gold standards of when it comes to integration. Right? Or today, you take what a Mintra is doing. Last year when we created an entire reality show around styling, right, which is the fashion superstar. Mintra is not just doing it as a one-off thing. Right now, the show is going to go into multiple seasons. They heavily invested in it, and the show also goes on to Mintra, the app, right, where there is a content to commerce sort of a thing as well, right. So this is right, like I said at the beginning, a brand taking a long-term position in content. Or you take again, a Tata Tea, and what we've done over the last 12, 13 years on Jagore, and every 2, 3 years the communication sort of changes, but the brand ethos and what we create in content remain the same. Right? Also, just to go back to your previous question, right, which is in terms of what percentage of content is a good thing. The other thing is also that's a very platform-driven question also, right? So what you can do on, say, with an influencer-led content on an e-commerce app, you can't do with an integration on cinema, so to say, right? So yeah.
And what percent of content, like in terms of percentage, I think we can't give an absolute number to it, but uh, you think brands are open to a piece of content which uh, like lets people live a certain story rather than just tell the brand story? And like I think initially you were talking about the brand can be a part of the story. So like the classic case of what you were talking about, TVF and Tiago, there was a story they had in mind, and that story would have a vehicle or an automobile in place. You think it's possible to create something like that across categories, or it's just uh, a fortunate coincidence that it happened with Tiago and tripling as a concept?
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, if I were to only talk to you about the last 10 months or so and what a brand's created, it's not a coincidence by any means, right? When we talk of the high-end alcohol, right, like the single malts of the world, the big challenge they have is you can't tell that story through surrogates. Right? I can't tell a Glenlivet story through music CDs and water bottles. Right? I have to actually tell the malt story. Right?
Right.
So that is when we realize that, and we realize this is the kind of an audience that we're speaking to, we created an entire series called The Spirit of Scotland on Hotstar, right, which is just something that it's beautifully shot. Technically, if you're a travel enthusiast, you'll go and watch that show. And a very strong thread, but still only a thread of that, is the malt story, right, of how a Glenlivet comes across. How do you, what goes behind the Shivas 18-year-old and all of those things, right? Um, so it's not a coincidence by any means. I think brands are continuing to do that. Some of them have moved on to platforms. Some of them continue to do it on long form text also.
Got it. And man, like speaking of doing web shows which have a strong connect with your brand, or like participating in an activity that involves a long format, a series of long format content. I think Parleji has been seeing a lot of opportunities, like say even from, I remember there was this agency which had reached out to me. They were a small influencer marketing boutique, and they were like, they want to connect with you. They saw that we are connected on LinkedIn, and they said they want to do something with a 20 character on like in Sacred Gates season 2. They have a concept with him in mind and say doing something for biology. So, like as a brand, are you open to such effervescent content which comes in the moment? And like if like I know like 10-15 years ago, if someone would have come to you with that pitch, you would not have taken them as seriously. But if it comes to you today, as a brand, are you open to experiment with something like that? Or
Yeah,
should
sure.
brands be exposed to something like that?
Yeah, so sure. So see, it depends. As I said earlier, also we look at content. We don't look at so we look it from the consumer prism or lens, where we see whether that would really interest consumer or not, and then how beautifully can I weave in my brand into it, not otherwise. So we've done, we've learned from mistakes. We've done some blunders and mistakes as well, and we've learned from it. So we went to an agency, a content creator, and we told them that we want to do something around some of our brands like Parle, Poppins, and Kiss Me, legacy brands. I mean, anybody would get nostalgic about those brands, and they came up with a beautiful story which will make somebody nostalgic. But everything was a force fit. So that entire web series that we did, it bombed. But when we talk about, so see, if we have a web series which is really good and if we are sure that was done for the brands. Unlike that, if I have a great idea of a web series, not for the brand, I'm saying, which consumers would love, and that's where I'm coming from, seeing it through consumers prism or lens. If they would love, then I would see whether my brands can be weaved in, beautifully into it, or seamlessly into it, and then do. So I would rather be open to good content and then seeing a fit with my brand, rather than going the other way around, where I say, okay, here's my brand, let's create some content for it. I mean, that's something that we have burnt our fingers with, and I would rather prefer keeping away from.
Fair, fair. And Sajni, I know that Wakefit has been doing a lot of branded content, but it's all most of it, or I think all of it, has happened on your own channel. Even you've started a YouTube channel wherein you're creating that content. So, is there a reservation for the brand to start looking at other platforms, or like using like start looking at other platforms, or your focus is that whatever content I create should remain with me, and I can always borrow expertise from creators or creator platforms, but by and large I would want that content to be with me and should reside with me as a brand.
I don't think it's about residing with us or us owning it more than it is about us being able to create long-term sustainable properties, and being able to kind of create concepts that allow us to create content at scale. So while we do want to become, publishers in a sense, it's not about it. Yes, it gives us a lot more freedom when we own the content and we're able to do a lot, and hopefully even with home time we'll be able to see a lot of cross collaboration with our own brand channel and the content that we put out on home time, which we are hoping to theme more on an entertainment leg rather than a product focused leg. But the idea is to be able to create content on a much more frequent, much more purposeful, and much more differentiated kind, rather than to own the content specifically. And I think it's a step in us becoming publishers as brands and being able to have a brand voice that's beyond just a social platform, and building that kind of community as well.
Got. So I think now we'll step to like an interesting segment of this particular panel discussion, wherein each panelist gets to ask a question to the other panelist. Like it could be one of the panelists or all of the panelists. Probably, I think Sajni, you could start and ask your question, and others could answer. This is the time when I take a back seat and I just see how things and how the conversations float.
I think my question would be to Mayank. If our product is very different from your product, and I was interested to know, in a product that's been is an FMCG. What is maybe your goal in terms of digital content creation, to try a new format or to be able to communicate or do with your community? Because you're already a legacy brand, but how do you kind of uh, make a digital impact while still keeping the legacy intact?
Okay. So different brands have different objectives, and within also different brands, we have objectives specifically meant for content. So there are multiple objectives at times, communication objectives for a specific brand. So let's say if I'm talking about Parle, if I have to reinforce the kind of trust that consumers have, not that they don't know about it, but I want to reinforce that. And if I want to, probably for the new younger generation, if I want to talk about that, then there are certain, content. So for example, there was a beautiful piece of content where we have weaved in how Parle is used, by most mothers. In fact, that's something that's been, going on since generation, as the first solid food given to infants, meshed in milk that's given. Now you require a content which has a mother dealing with the infant, probably taking care of it, and that's something that you can weave in beautifully. So depending on the objective, we decide what sort of content should be. So we keep looking out for good content, which, as I said earlier, would really resonate with consumers, which they would love to consume, and then see how we can beautifully weave in our brand depending on the objectives that we have. And we have different objectives, as I said, for different brands, and within brands also there are different communication objectives. So that's how we typically work with content providers or content curators.
Raj, Karthik, would you like to add something to the question or?
No, I think it's good, but I agree with Mayank here. It's totally what he said.
Okay. Raj, would you like to pose a question to a panelist and to?
No, my question is really simple. Yeah, content. There are two content creators are sitting here. So it's the best thing can ask. Two creative people are sitting here. And one is platform and one is the creators. No, I think like I always says, decade is there was time and decade used to be 10 years. Now decade is actually 2 years. We've seen things changing very fast in every content creators to when we're getting into the platforms. Every day, new platform is popping up. Every day, what do you call that? New influencer coming into this thing. So just a little bit about Karthik and Sajni, just tell me, when you're working with the influencers, right? A lot of brands comes to the influencers and says, "Ki ye kar do." And sadly I have seen very few except I think so what do you call that, makeup brands or some FMCG brands or some fashion brands. I have a really tough time seeing influencers actually creating maybe lifestyle brand, maybe you got to travel and something. What are the other places you can do, and what point you think brands should come to influencers?
Sajni, you want to go first?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last bit of of the sentence you said. At what point do you think?
What point you think the brands should come to influencers? After having an idea or after cracking the idea and the TVC is done, everything is done, you come to influencers, or you start parallelly working with influencers before the campaign has been done, or vice versa? It's all, as I'm telling you, it's open for you guys.
I think it should be at the conceptual stage itself. When I was in the agency, we worked on a campaign called the Puma Sweat Gully, and it was really interesting for us to kind of bring different kinds of influencers together. Like there were influencers in the dance space, there were influencers in the music space, in the rap space, and we kind of brought everyone together and we created something together, and that gave influencers a lot more ownership to what they were sharing, what they were doing with the brand, and it became a lot more, I would say, organic rather than transactional as a relationship. So I think conceptually including an influencer is, in my opinion, the best way to go.
No, I completely agree. But I think this has become less of an inspired decision and more of a data-driven decision, right? Especially in the last 2-3 years. A bit like the Brisbane GABA win itself. Like it's not an inspired inning. It's like we prepared towards this for many years. So I'll give you an example. We did a piece of campaign for a Mother Dairy, which is, as you can tell, is not the most digital savvy brand in the world, right? And it was a launch of ghee, and they were launching it for the first time, and we knew which is the geographical market they wanted to do this, etc. Right? Now, intuition and inspiration also would have told us that you probably go with a seasoned soap star, a very motherly sort of a character talking about Garkha Khana and all of that, right? And but then when we looked at data, we realized we were going to take poetry as a route. This is exactly the market. This is a Hindi-speaking market that we want to target, and we want to target them on digital, etc. And all the needles were pointing towards someone like a Zakir Khan, right? Which is not at all a intuitive choice in this. So we went to Zakir, and Zakir, created a lovely piece of content along with us, and we didn't expect the kind of success that we will get with that campaign. It went to a level where their primary competition, Mr. Sodhi from Amul, um, tweeted about it and said, "What heart-wrenching content this is!" Right? So to me, I feel a lot of these choices are you can lean in on the data crutch fairly reasonably well, I feel.
And to add to it, I think Raj, when it comes to choosing when to involve influencers or when do you go to influencers, it also depends on what kind of influencers you're looking at. If you're looking at people who are good creators, you would involve them in the earlier stages of the campaign, or like Sajni said, it would be in on a conceptual stage. But then if you're looking at people who are good with amplification or distribution, so to say, who can take your message forward, then probably those influencers come in at a later stage. So I think one of the other Mother Dairy campaigns which I remember of the recent times is, I know that Neena Gupta has now become very relevant in
Yeah,
today's time. Her appearance in Panchayat, and then like there was a show on Masaba, so she was also there in that show. I think that's why Mother Dairy did a good video with her around, I think, paneer, like promoting a new range of paneer or something,
that's
I
right.
remember.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I really like the
Great,
fitment
Hitesh.
of.
I'm impressed. You're not even the TG, but you remember the influencer and the brand. That's superb.
Because we
No,
follow the space, right?
I think. See, there is we are getting into celebrity and influencers. That's my biggest thing is not celebrity. I'm saying
Right,
influencers. Influencers are the creators. The what I Sajni is
right,
like. I quite like what he says. They're creators. When you're creating, don't cut their wings by saying, this is what the brand has been done. Let them work
right,
with the brand team. Let them work with the team. Then the best creation can happen because you're actually working with something that one of the best creatives.
right,
What
right,
brand can't do, they know how to do it. Some influencers have more followers than some population of countries. You know what I mean? If
right.
if you're working with them, understand they understand consumers better. You know what I mean? That's what I
Yeah,
understand. Because a lot of time we do the data thing. Karthik bang on. We do the data thing. This is the thing. Okay, this is the thing. After the campaign has been done, maybe when we work with the campaign, okay, we ask because that's what we also faced a lot of problems, and that's why I asked you guys the thing. Because when you're working with a bunch of creative people who knows how to play the game very well, let's play with them. Let's understanding their understanding about the market. We may be the market leader on something. We understand the market. Like I'm telling you, like we work the brands and we live the brands 24 hours. We know the brand purpose, brand ethos, brand pyramid, creative structure of the. But wait a second, the consumers, we understand consumers, but the way consumers accept content in that platform, they know it better. Let's create with them than to create after we create something with them. I think that's what to understand because I think everyone is facing the same problem, and that is why very few good influencer-led campaign you love it. You know what I mean? When you see
Yeah,
it says
yeah.
this is amazing, and they're amazing creators. Trust me, I love the creators. I'm a big fan of those creators, and all of them I meet are like, wow, how you guys do it? Tell me, how you have so much
and
followers? Tell me.
yeah, I'm telling you from my experience of interacting with these creators, even they need people like you by their side. I mean, they would want to have a good story with them. So, like you said, they understand their audience well. And at times they have good writers in place of they also write themselves. But
Yep,
they
yep.
also need expertise from your end to sort of craft something that that goes beyond what they've been doing
Yeah.
uh,
No, that might
already.
be true, but what Raj is saying is very important, right? In the sense,
Yeah,
one of the most suicidal things you could do in this space is get an influencer who is creating beautifully, and ask him to talk like a brand, right? He has to talk like how he normally talks. That's better for the brand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So Karthik, what's your question, and to who would you like to ask?
I have a question for all the panelists, which is tell me your most favorite piece of branded content which you were not involved with in the last 1 year, from the last 1 year.
It's a very tough question, guys.
Something you admired.
So, like, I think
One
while
I
others
like
are
it.
thinking,
So Hitesh, so I like
yeah,
something of a Getroid recently did. I think so. When the peak of COVID, they created a very interesting content. They created. It's a content. Just I'm not telling you branded content because Super Bowl was shut down. But what they turned into those fields, into those stadiums, into hospitals. And I remember the content was about why I like it because it talks about let's forget about what colors we are from support, and they're converting the fields after fields after fields into hospitals. And I remember that when I saw the first time in the peak of Konda, there is no way you can shoot, you can do. They, I think, own with the news. They create a content, they create something which was a content, turn into a content. You know what I mean? And I remember it was all over news and everything that NFL has actually converting all the stadiums into hospitals, into hospital, into hospital. He says, wow, now that's a content that I wanted to create because they actually took over the news with that. And I think so next is what's happening in the politics now. So I think that's good. Cool. Yeah, that's Karthik, who's my favorite one. Converting the NFL stadiums into and turning videos
Nice
out
one.
of
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
stories out of it.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Sajni, Mayank, do you have a favorite?
I like the IPL campaign that Cred did. I thought it was really funny and it was really quirky. So
Interesting. That can be a separate webinar by itself.
Well, yeah. I like the campaign that Mondelez did recently. Around Diwali on how to probably lit up Diwali of local retailers. I think
Yes.
beautiful insight and very human, as in everybody, right from consumers to even the traders. So I mean, basically being marketeer, I mean, I'm also looking at the other side, on how it can work for you beyond consumers as well. Your customers, the retailers would be stocking your product. I think the kind of goodwill that was generated for them was tremendous, great equity generated.
Yeah.
So I think very good piece of content that was done by them. And I think that's something that probably helps brand build a solid franchise, not just within your consumers or end users, but even your customers.
No, thank you so much, Mike, for that one. In fact, that campaign, when we did that for Mondelez was very interesting because the idea was very simple that we cracked in the first half an hour. But to actually bring it to life, the AI part of it was,
Yeah.
most of the retailers are not listed in Google, so that took us many weeks. But I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you.
No, but that was a beautiful campaign, I must say.
Karthik, what's your favorite piece of content in the last 1 year?
Stuff that I've not been involved in or been involved in.
Not involved. Or
Many,
maybe
man.
the
I
one
think,
you're
yeah. No, I think the one that really moved. I really loved everything that Dream 11 did. Though it's not really content, it's a TVC. But I absolutely love that campaign. And there is also this German healthcare brand whose name I forget. Had done a piece of video which I thought was very powerful. It was about an old man actually lifting weights. Pointlessly in his house for many days, and people around his neighborhood think that he's gone nuts. And then later on around Christmas, he lifts his granddaughter so that she can put the star on top of the tree. I thought very few campaigns have moved me that way. So I was very much in line with what the brand stands for, right? This heart health. So I really enjoyed that.
super. Mayank, what's your question to the panelists? And like, is
Uh,
the question addressed to someone specific or to all the panelists?
yeah. So I have a question for both Raj and Karthik. In fact, see, normally what happens with a brand is that when we are looking at a direction and how we steer a particular brand, we try and understand, our need gap. We try and understand our consumers. We do a little bit of ethnographic studies and stuff like that. What you talked about, culturally decoding the culture of humans. When you work on content, how do you work on it? As in, because it's really very tricky to get content that would really make consumers, long for it. As Raj, said that, you'd be crazy about the content and you'd love to share it with everybody. I mean, at the end of the day, the beauty of digital lies in, earned media rather than paid media. So if you can just share, your insights into how do you work with, generate content which would really be, I guess, something that consumers would long to watch
Right.
or consume.
After you, Raj.
Karthik, go for it. Go for it.
Hey, for us, it begins in, again, like I said at the beginning, in understanding the culture or the subculture, right? We as boring as it sounds, we start with data, right? If it is music, and then we did a piece of content with a musician and Cadbury's, Jocelyn Royal. It's a beautiful piece of music, right? So for us, it starts there. Like, what is the intervention you're making? What works in this space, and everything else. And then after that, it becomes, once we know the contours of it, once we know the playground very well, then it is completely over to the creative mind. Right? Whether it is the creative minds inwardly within our own organization, or the creators we are working with, right? Like the Mother Area example. But for us, it starts with understanding the culture. That's step one.
Yeah, I think, Mike, for me, there is a couple of things that works. First is, the context is important. Context is important. What's happening now? Is it relevant to my life or not? Is it part of my life, or is it going to be alienating to what you are saying? But after that, also something very interesting thing, that whenever we create a content, any content we create, this is, हमारा हिंदी में बोला नवरस होता है, ठीक है, 9 emotions that we have, and what are the emotions you are touching first? What are the emotion you are living with the end of it, and you track back. It says what I want people to feel for my brand when I'm seeing this. After this is over, what you want to feel about it. It's do you want to do, it's like होता है ना, आप जब अपना इंडिया में जब हम थाली खाते हैं, लास्ट में स्वीट आता है, क्योंकि आपका जो मुंह होता है ना, वो मीठा करना होता है. Right, it's simple like this, right? In the same way, when you're creating a content, it's anything that we created. It's like, for me, a thali. You have to have multiple ups and downs and everything, and you reach that one point when what emotion that you want to live. I think we did something for Twitter. It's an ad, but it's just not an ad. It's a video for Twitter they created. We created a beautiful story, but at the end we created with 10 hashtags: hashtag Me Too, hashtag Kerala Flood, hashtag Sachin Retirement, hashtag this thing. And when you see this, suddenly the joke that we had, you realize, every joke that we do on a hashtag could be a massive movement that can happen on Twitter. And that was also, you go through the entire fight with yourself to create the content that changes everything for that moment. Like I told you, I'm taking 10 minutes from you, I'm taking 5 minutes from you, I'm taking 1 minute for you. I have to give you back something. And I think I'm lucky enough to work, I think so, guys like Ram Madhwani or Shimit Amin or Vikramaditya or Prosit, and with some big great director I work with, they know those moments right. The moment's right, and you have to work through Navras, and that is what, even the Parasite director said, right? It's all about, not about how expensive you are. Your movie is how many more emotions you can fill into that story. There is, and life is all about that. You laugh, you cry, and you hug someone. You are greedy. A lot of emotions are there. What you want to live with, and every time, either we do a radio, we do a post, or we do a content, we create a video, or we could writing a long copy, or we creating anything. Kya emotion chahiye tere ko last mein? And that's what we ask everything. What we want the consumer to be left with. If we know that, I think we will create a great content for that. I think, Mike, that answers your question.
Yeah. Beautifully.
Great. So I think we'll quickly wrap up the session with one takeaway that you've had in the past 1 year from the pandemic and like from a content perspective, and probably you could share one trend that you are really excited about and you are really looking forward to in 2021. We could start with you, Sajni.
I think what the pandemic really taught us is how to be agile and how to be able to create content in any situation. Again, with the open letters campaign, all we did was have have the influencers or the creators take the video on their phone and then send it to us. So the entire production of it was virtual, but we were able to pull that off when virtually everybody had stopped creating content. So that kind of thinking on our feet really helped us, and I think that that's something that we should continue doing. And I think one trend, I think that long form video is something that's it has been there and it is here to stay. And with our new Hometime channel, we're really excited to see where that goes and how we can kind of leverage that kind of content.
Great. Mayank, for you.
Yeah. So look, going forward, what I would be looking forward to is, ways and means to probably adapt your content to various channels. So today, what we still are doing is that we have content for a particular channel. But probably what we did with marketing and communication earlier, where we talked about 360-degree and adapted it to various mediums. I mean, if we can have content ideas being adapted to various channels, today, that would be great. Because we still, largely feel that, certain ideas are better suited for a particular channel. But beyond that, it's a challenge to, adapt them to other channels or repurpose them for other channels.
Super. Raj.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that first pandemic taught us is forget the long term, do the short term. Don't do so much planning. Yeah, there is no time to plan. Just do it. And when you are doing it, either it's good, move on. If it's bad, move on. Just to clear the next big thing. Don't have happy when you're doing a good piece of work and people says amazing, or don't feel sad if you're saying a good piece of work and people don't like it. Just move on to the next piece of work. Move on. That's it.
Got it. And one trend that you would foresee, like you're foreseeing and you're really excited about in 2021?
Do it yourself. Start creating yourself. Don't like it's anything that you are doing, either you are writing or you are directing, and be a multitasker. It's everything is on you now. So if you look at it in my team now, thanks to what do you call that, work from home, now the teams are shooting, doing themselves, like editing themselves. Everyone knows how to edit, but that we had started already before the lockdown happened. So everyone is creating every prototype or every video themselves now. You see a lot of video that's out in the last what do you call it, we did some sometimes 45 days we did some 95 pieces of work, and out of which 60 was created by the people. Yeah, so I think that's amazing. There is no way for waiting for someone. Start creating yourself. Do it yourself.
Got it. Karthik, for you?
See, for me, I think the realization during the pandemic, and of course we learned it the hard way, is that marketing dollars are going to be expected to work much, much harder than I ever did. Right? So outcome-based content really has to be the way. Right? Otherwise, I don't think we'll be able to do what we used to do 3-4 years back. For example, when we did an integration with the Tata Tea and Shakuntala Devi, it's not just enough for it to be a communication. We had to bring it on to Amazon in the pantry and then make sure that people see what they're buying. Right? That's how hard content needs to work. And I think going forward, one trend that I absolutely foresee is there's going to be a hell of a lot of more empathy in marketing than ever. It's globally true. I don't think all of us have gone through the same emotion as a species, as a universe at the same time until now, right? So I think all communication, all whether it is cause marketing or not, it's going to be deeply rooted in empathy. Right? I don't think we have a choice there. That's going to be part of the culture that we're going into.
Super, super. Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys, for sparing our time for this. It was fun having different perspectives on board. I hope you guys also enjoyed the session. For those of you who are still tuned in, you guys can follow them on LinkedIn, follow their work. I think each one of them has been doing some great work in the content space. Especially, I think I forgot to mention the Pampers campaign, which Raj and his team did with Virat Kohli, like on the announcement of Virat and Anushka's baby, was something which was really, really cool, and you should definitely check it out. Thank you, guys. Thanks a lot. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Thanks, Hitesh. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.